You're listening to the AI Moment with me, Jonathan Wagstaff.
And me, Danny Denhout.
And today we're announcing a short summer break we're going to take with the pod. So we started the pod around about a year ago, Danny and I. And the purpose then was to really focus on particularly either leaders of growing businesses or departmental leaders in enterprise organizations. And we wanted to focus on the relevance of AI to those people. So we've remained through the last 12 months really focused on how business leaders can use AI, how they should think about AI, helpful things to think about and do, what exercises you might want to run, what processes you might want to invoke. We've really tried to cover AI from a business leader point of view. But we've reached the summer of 2026 and we're ready for a little break. So we're going to take July and August off from the pod. And then we're going to come back in the autumn refreshed and ready to go and still focused on what does AI mean for business leaders. Now, having said that, there are a number of things happening at the moment that it's probably worth raising and maybe asking you, our listeners, to think about as the summer goes on. Keep an eye on some of these things because we think they're going to be relevant, and then maybe we'll discuss them again when we come back in the autumn. So, Dan, give us a feeling for some of those things that you think might be important for business leaders to look at this summer.
For me and for the business leaders I've been talking to, there are 5 or 6 different themes that are coming up that I think you should be prepared for. We've raised them before in the pod, so you can always go back and re-listen. But token cost and the increase of it is going to be something that is really important. The more work that your team does in and around AI, especially when engineering and building tools, it's going to maximize token usage. And we've already seen that Claude is an absolute monster in charging for your usage. The second one is the use of always on recording tools. So there's a lot of devices that people are starting to bring into the workplace. So they're always recording. So things like the Meta glasses or the Snap glasses that come out, they are useful for people, but they do invade privacy. Expect more of these devices to come in, especially over the summer. And if you've seen the Samsung and Gary Neville advert, you'll understand that the importance of understanding when people can use them and when they can't. So not just granola in some of those apps, it's actually devices within meetings. And remember to include it in your AI manifesto, which we've talked around a number of times before. The cost of doing more work with AI, and what I mean by that is more slop generally. So more summaries, less deep dives, less attention to detail around when someone creates content with AI versus when they've read it themselves, they've gone through it, they become an expert in that field and can talk that through. So just be really mindful of that. I've spoken to a number of different business leaders the last 3 months that are really worried that their team aren't across it and overly rely on AI. Jonathan's nodding away, so I think he's heard that one too. A couple of others from me will be the AI filtering of job applications and the use of AI when hiring. It's done a great job in filtering through a number of large applications and applicants, but a lot of the automated filtering is off and the great candidates are being missed and a lot of biases are being shown through this. So I'd just be super aware of it and understand that. And if you're going to have to go through it, I would go through layers of review just to make sure that you're not overlooking or having bias in your hiring. And that also applies with firing too. And my last one is the push towards agentic. It's not something, if you don't sit in AI all the time, it's something you don't hear of a lot. But a lot of the big fintech, a lot of the big tech companies are pushing through and pushing agentic and making sure that there's more and more purchases, more and more agentic decisions being made. So rather than sitting there making a lot of decisions, people are firing off their agents and bots to go and do something completely autonomously without your involvement. So just be really mindful of the push into that. And there's a lot of marketing that's coming out of this. There are a few areas that I think are really important. We've covered almost all of those extensively on the pod. We'll do a deep dive on a newsletter we send out accompanying, and I'll also add it into the show notes. And Jonathan, you had a couple of others that you wanted to talk through as well, right?
Yeah, there's one that's just occurred while you were talking, Dan, which is obviously as well the way that search has changed. And when I speak to just about anybody under 30 now, they are not Googling things at all. They really have shifted into an AI search-based model. And I think we're seeing that move more quickly than people thought, and that will continue. one of the things I've seen is a nervousness in some leaders because of all this nonsense with Anthropic and the US government, where the US government basically shut down a number of models for export and then shut down them for nothing but government use. And then they're on again, they're off again, they're on again. I think that's created nervousness in some leaders around, okay, where do we build our AI capability and what do we use? And is there a danger that the platform we choose could be taken out of action by the US government? And I also think I agree with you. We're in that point of slight retrenchment. So I think it's what Gartner would have called the sort of, you have that early hype cycle thing, don't you? And then they have that little trough they drop into, and then we come out gradually. And I think we're maybe somewhere near that trough at the moment. I'm having a number of conversations with people where, that they maybe thought AI was going to be the absolute wonder thing that fixed everything, and it's not quite turned out like that. The point you just made about the costs are actually, the amount of money being spent on AI tokens is more than people thought. And so actually the equation that says get rid of this person, replace them with AI is not as clear a financial equation as it was. So there's a number of those things happening along the lines of that you mentioned and some of the other things that you talked about. And yeah, I think device, I'm seeing lots of people using Claude at the moment, which is, for those that don't know, is a credit card sized AI recorder. So you use it in meetings. You can actually clip it on your phone, it'll record your phone call. And then it pretty well quickly gives you, it works out what it is. Is this a conversation? Is this a presentation? It works out what it is. And it gives you a written summary, which you can then download into PowerPoint or Word, wherever you want. Loads of people using Claude, but it's so discreet. Somebody just puts it down on the table and they don't necessarily announce that they're recording everything. And I also think the bigger challenge is the one you talked about, Dan. I think the Ray-Ban, the Meta Ray-Bans, people are really uncomfortable with the idea that they might be recorded when they don't think they're being recorded. And of course, somebody's gone, well, it appears to be a normal pair of Ray-Bans on a distance. Actually, they're recording everything. So there's a number of things for people to keep their eye on. I think you're right. I think we've covered a number of them in pods in the early part of the summer, but I think they're all going to be things that play up bigger as we come back into the autumn. So we've got an interesting year ahead, a really interesting year ahead. But I do believe it will be the year. You said all along 26 was the year. I believe 26 now into 27 will be when we start to really see the engine move and we really separate what's really working from the kind of hype and noise. It's going to be an interesting autumn.
So the 5 podcasts to listen back to, we'll add in the show notes, but the 5 pods to listen back to or listen for the first time if you missed them is open source AI. So it's now a hot topic. Major companies are building on top of it. So a lot of the big travel companies that are building on top of DeepSeek, Quan, etc. How to run an AI transformation. If you're still struggling with that is a deep dive Jonathan and I did. I can't emphasize enough how important that is versus just rolling tools out and listening back, because we give you a real breakdown of how to do it. There's a paradox of productivity, quality versus quantity, how people are using AI to create or curate away from it. And then what are the best practices in AI training? I honestly think that's one of the better ones we've done. And then lastly, AI culture and the future of work and view. That is packed absolutely full of gems for business leaders. And that's with Dr. Kelly. So I highly, highly recommend those 5 podcasts for your summer listening.
And the other thing, of course, I'd say is that if there are subjects or areas that anyone listening is encountering, then let us know, right? Because we're more than happy to address anything that comes up in your lives and your work to do with AI. Bang us a question. If we can address it, we will. We're more than happy to discuss it, come up with answers if we can, certainly address the issue. So anybody listening, if you're encountering things this summer, let us know and we'll be happy to incorporate those as we go through. I think, Dan, it just remains for us to say to everyone, have a fantastic summer, whether you're staying home, going away, or whatever you're doing. And we will see you in September.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and enjoy your summer.